I never imagined that opening a single envelope could set my heart dancing and my imagination racing all at once. It was a crisp Thursday morning, March 12, 2025, when the mail arrived in its usual, unremarkable procession: bills, ads, a magazine subscription renewal. But nestled among the mundane was a heavier than normal, gilded invitation addressed to me in flowing, inked cursive, Mrs. Delilah Beechwood. My pulse fluttered. The paper bore a subtle watermark of intertwined rings and lilies, and I could almost feel the soft ridges of the embossed edges under my fingertips. The handwriting was unmistakably Eliza's, my granddaughter, whose bright spirit had been the light of my life since the day she was born. To think that she was now old enough to be married, to stand at the threshold of a lifelong commitment, brought tears to my eyes. I carried the envelope to the kitchen table, where a porcelain teacup steamed gently beside a plate of freshly baked scones. The faint scent of lemon and lavender mingled with the honeyed warmth of Earl Grey tea. With a small, ceremonial flourish, I slit the envelope and unfolded the vellum inside. "You are cordially invited to celebrate the union of Eliza Harper and Thomas Whitaker, Saturday, June 21, 2025, 3 p.m. Lakeside at Willowmere Gardens. A reception will immediately follow. Formal attire requested. Please arrive by 2:45 p.m. Name tags will be provided upon entry." I set the invitation down and closed my eyes, picturing the crystalline surface of Willowmere Lake, framed by weeping willows whose branches kissed the water's edge. I remembered the afternoons I'd spent there with Eliza as a child, teaching her to skip stones, chasing her as she waded ankle-deep in the shallows, her laughter ringing brighter than any bird call. A small notation at the bottom caught my eye: "Name tags will be provided upon entry." I frowned gently. Eliza knew how private I was, how I preferred to blend into the background, to be known not by a printed badge, but by personal connection. The idea of wearing a name tag at my granddaughter's wedding felt, at best, unnecessary, and, at worst, formulaic, yet, I would not let such a trivial detail dampen my spirits. After all, I had spent the last several months quietly overseeing arrangements alongside Eliza and Thomas. From selecting the caterer who specialized in heirloom family recipes, to negotiating with the florist who promised to replicate the exact shade of blush in Eliza's favorite peony, to ensuring every linen napkin bore the delicate embroidery our family crest demanded, I had poured my love and resources into crafting this day. And I wouldn't trade a single moment of the planning process. Over the next 3 months, each day seemed to bring its own small thrill. In late March, Eliza and I traveled to New York to meet with the renowned dressmaker whose ateliers lined Madison Avenue. We sifted through bolts of silk tulle and vintage lace, until I found the perfect sample swatch of seafoam green fabric for my own gown, a color Eliza insisted would make Grandma look like a blooming spring. She was the sweetest cheerleader, whispering compliments into my ear with unbridled enthusiasm. April was consumed by tastings. I still remember the soft crunch of cucumber cilantro gazpacho shooters and the subtle sweetness of goat cheese stuffed figs drizzled in truffle honey, each bite a testament to Eliza's impeccable taste. We spent an entire afternoon sampling cakes, vanilla bean layered with raspberry preserves, chocolate ganache infused with espresso, and finally, a towering masterpiece of sugar pearl pink tears. Eliza closed her eyes at the first taste of the latter and, with a dreamy sigh, said, "This one, Grandma. This is the one." May arrived with its own flurry of activity: rehearsal dinners, seating charts, and the final decision on escort cards calligraphed by an artist in California. Throughout it all, I delighted in my role as benefactor, not for show, but because I could. My husband, now gone these 5 years, had always believed in spoiling our grandchildren, and it felt fitting to carry on that tradition in his honor. Yet beneath the surface of my excitement lurked a familiar tug of trepidation. I worried about guest logistics, anxious about weather forecasts for late June, and, though I hardly admitted it, even the delicate matter of being the center of attention, even in a modest way. I had always been happiest behind the scenes, orchestrating from the wings. The thought of standing at the ceremony entrance, gazing at the faces of friends and family, name tag firmly in place, made my fingers tighten around the invitation card. The morning of June 21 dawned bright and clear. I awoke before sunrise, the sky already flushed with pale gold. After a light breakfast of fresh melon and yogurt, I slipped into the seafoam green gown Eliza had picked out, a gift she proudly presented wrapped in soft tissue and tied with a satin ribbon. My reflection in the mirror glowed back at me, silvery. Hair swept into an elegant chignon, a strand of pearls at my neck, and eyes bright with anticipation. Then came the moment I had both anticipated and dreaded, stepping into the limousine that would take me to Willowmere. As the car rolled east, I rehearsed my entrance, a gentle smile, a calm nod to the attendant handing out name tags. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this small distraction could not diminish the day's joy. When we arrived, the lakeside vista was more breathtaking than I'd imagined. White draperies billowed in the breeze, and the water sparkled like a scattering of diamonds. Under a grand willow tree, chairs were arranged in perfect symmetrical rows, each adorned with a single peony. Orchestral strings played softly in the distance. A young woman in a crisp white blouse and navy skirt approached me, clipboard in hand, her expression polite yet impersonal. "Mrs. Beechwood," she said, reading from a list, "here's your name tag. Please affix it to your left side." She handed me a sticker-cum sheet of laminated cardstock. My heart sank at the weight of it. I pressed the edge of the tag onto my dress without looking, then slipped past the attendant into the throng of arriving guests. A child squealed with delight as she raced past, clutching a basket of rose petals. An elderly couple paused to admire my gown. Somewhere, a small dog barked. Amid the buzz of conversation, I felt a tiny tug on my sleeve. I turned to see my great-nephew, Jamie, no more than 8 years old, peering up at me with wide, conspiratorial eyes. "Grandma," he whispered, voice quavering with the thrill of mischief, "your name tag." Laughing softly, I followed his pointed finger. My breath caught. There, in bold, printed letters, was my official identifier for the day, Delilah Beechwood, the old lady who's paying for everything for a heartbeat. The words seemed to mock me, branding me as nothing more than a benefactor, a checkbook with eyelashes. Heat rushed to my cheeks. I closed my eyes, drawing in a steadying breath of warm June air. Then I opened them again, resolved to reclaim my dignity. There would be time later to address this, to discover whose idea it had been, to ask for an immediate replacement, or perhaps no name tag at all, because for now, there was a wedding about to begin, and my heart belonged wholly to my granddaughter. The bride whose smile could light up the darkest of rooms. And so, with my shoulders back and my resolve firm, I tucked my name tag beneath my clutch and lifted my chin as the string quartet began the bridal march. In that moment, I decided, no paper emblem, no printed phrase could capture the depth of my love. And however this day unfolded, I would be present for Eliza in the way that mattered most, fully, joyfully, and without reservation. Thus began the most unforgettable afternoon of my life. I settled into my seat near the front row of white wooden chairs, the late afternoon sun casting dappled patterns through the willow's lacy branches. The gentle lapping of water against the shore provided a soothing counterpoint to the thrumming excitement in my chest. As I smoothed the folds of my seafoam green gown, my fingers brushed the crisp edge of the name tag tucked discreetly beneath my clutch. I made a mental promise, today would not be about a sticker. Around me, familiar faces beamed with happiness. Old friends from book club whispered greetings, children fidgeted in their parents' laps, and distant cousins, whom I'd last seen at my daughter's graduation, raised their glasses in a silent salute. I offered nods and smiles, basking in the warmth that only family brings. Yet, despite the joyous atmosphere, a small knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I had wanted this day to reflect the love I held for Eliza, an embodiment of every lullaby sung at bedtime, every scraped knee kissed and soothed, and every proud applause I'd offered at her school plays. I delighted in having the means to craft such a celebration, the hand-embroidered linens, the string quartet flown in from Vienna, the custom ice sculpture of 2 swans forming a heart. But as each luxurious detail came to life, I felt the subtle pressure of expectation settle on my shoulders. It began with the caterer's maitre d', who approached me during the cocktail hour. He bowed slightly and said, "Mrs. Beechwood, should we serve another round of the smoked salmon canapés, or would you prefer more lamb lollipops?" His deference reminded me that everyone presumed I was in charge, not just of this morsel of the reception, but of the entire affair. I forced a smile. "Let's continue with the salmon for now, thank you." Yet as he scurried away, I caught the curious glances of other guests. They whispered among themselves, as though I were the prime mover of every petal and plate. Later, I drifted toward the bar area, seeking the comfort of a crisp glass of lemonade. The bartender, a young man with impeccable posture, greeted me with practiced courtesy. "Mrs. B, may I offer you a bespoke cocktail? The signature Lake Breeze features elderflower and cucumber." I shook my head. "Just lemonade, please." But when he turned away, I caught him murmuring to a colleague, "She's making sure everything runs perfectly, as expected." Each interaction, innocent as it may have seemed, weighed on me. I began to feel less like a loving grandmother, and more like the wedding's cornerstone, an essential yet silently burdened fixture. I remembered how Eliza had once confided that she felt guilty about the cost of the wedding, but that I had brushed aside her concerns with a gentle laugh. "My dear, money is meant to be spent on moments like these." And now, that generosity threatened to overshadow the very purpose of the day. I longed for people to see me not as the benefactor, but as Delilah, the storyteller, the confidant, the woman whose pride in Eliza ran deeper than any ledger could capture. My reverie was interrupted when my daughter slipped into the seat beside me. She wore a pastel lavender dress that matched her eyes, and her expression bore both love and apprehension. "Mother," she began, voice low but urgent, "are you all right?" I studied her face, illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns strung above. She looked every bit the gracious daughter and supportive sister, yet her eyes hinted at questions unspoken. "I'm fine," I assured her, touching her hand warmly. "Just taking it all in." She nodded, but I could see her worry. "You've done more than enough," she whispered. "Eliza and Thomas are grateful, but they want you to enjoy this without feeling like you must oversee every detail." Her words struck a chord. I had orchestrated, no, financed, this entire event, but at what cost to my own peace of mind? The truth was, I neglected to give myself permission to be celebrated simply for being family, rather than for my financial contributions. As if on cue, the music shifted, and the string quartet began a lilting waltz. Couples rose from their seats, inviting partners to the dance floor. I watched as Eliza glided through the dance steps with her new husband, their movements perfectly synchronized. Around them, guests twirled under cascades of lantern light, laughter swirling like confetti. My daughter squeezed my hand. "Come dance with me," she urged gently. I hesitated, glancing at the empty spot next to her. Then, gathering my courage, I rose. The soft fabric of my gown rustled as we joined the dancers. Hands clasped, we swayed to the melody. With each step, I felt a small weight lift from my shoulders. The night air carried the scent of jasmine and the distant whisper of willows. In that moment, I realized that no amount of planning or spending could manufacture the true essence of celebration, the joy of connection, the warmth of shared laughter, and the simple grace of being present. As my daughter's laughter mingled with the music, I let go of the role everyone expected of me. Under the watchful stars, I became not the matriarch bankrolling every detail, but a grandmother dancing freely in the glow of her family's love. And in that surrender, I discovered the greatest gift of all, peace. The sky had deepened into hues of violet and indigo by the time I slipped away from the dance floor. Lanterns swayed overhead, their flickering glow casting dancing shadows across the cobblestones. Laughter and music drifted behind me, guests twirling beneath strands of lights, children chasing one another in gleeful circles, but I moved in silence, drawn toward the quiet seclusion of the pavilion's walled garden. The ivy-clad alcove smelled of night-blooming jasmine, and a stone bench nestled beneath an arched trellis offered a momentary refuge. I sank onto its cool surface, my fingers absently brushing the embossed pearlescent petals of the corsage pinned to my gown. The tag was gone, Eliza had removed it, but its sting lingered in my thoughts. "Grandma?" My daughter's soft voice startled me. She emerged from behind a column of white roses, her lavender dress catching the light. In one hand she held 2 flutes of champagne, condensation beating on the crystal. She sat beside me, offering one. "Thank you," I whispered, accepting the glass. We sipped in companionable silence as the strains of a waltz drifted in from the main pavilion. The night air was warm, but a cool breeze stirred the leaves above, sending a scatter of petals drifting at our feet. Finally, my daughter sighed. "I talked to Eliza," she said quietly. "She's waiting for you by the lake." My breath caught. "By the lake?" She nodded. "She said there's something she wants to tell you, something she needs to say with no one else around." I set my glass on the bench's edge and rose unsteadily, smoothing the soft folds of my gown. "Very well," I murmured, following her through a discreet side gate that led to the moonlit shoreline. The path wound past weeping willows whose branches brushed the water's surface. Fireflies flickered like tiny lanterns among the reeds. At the lake's edge, Eliza stood alone, her posture rigid, hands clasped in front of her. The long train of her wedding gown fanned out behind her, and a single bloom, my favorite, the peony, was tucked into her hair. The gentle lapping of water against the stones was the only sound as I approached. "Eliza," I said softly. She turned, and in the lantern light I saw her eyes glisten. "Grandma," she began, her voice unsteady. She paused, searching my face. "I owe you an apology." My heart tightened. I took another careful step forward. "My darling, you have nothing to apologize for." Eliza lifted a hand, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "No," she insisted. "About the name tag, the one that called you the old lady who's paying for everything." I thought it was a playful nod to your generosity, but I never meant to embarrass you. I inhaled the crisp night air. "I know why you did it," I said gently, "and I understand your intention." Her gaze dropped to the stones between us. "I've spent the past few weeks worrying that you'd regret how much you've spent, that you'd feel overshadowed by your own gift." She looked up, and her voice trembled. "You've done more for me than I can ever repay, and all I wanted was for people to see how much I love you." I took a tentative step forward, closing the distance between us. "Eliza," I whispered, "the greatest gift you could ever give me is simply to be your grandmother, and to share this day with you." Tears welled in her eyes. I was so focused on the big picture, the flowers, the food, the dress, that I forgot what really matters. She inhaled deeply. "I forgot that you deserve kindness and respect, not a label pinned to your chest." I reached out and brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "Sweetheart, I'm proud of you every single day. Not because of what I can give, but because of who you are." She blinked rapidly, as if to steady herself. Then, in a sudden motion, she threw herself into my arms. The soft rustle of silk and lace filled the space between us. For a long moment, we simply held each other, the world beyond the willow branches fading into a quiet hum. When we finally parted, Eliza took my hands in hers. "Please forgive me," she said. "And please, let me make it right." I smiled, squeezing her fingers. "You've already made it right," I assured her. "Let's go back inside. There's still dancing to be done." Hand in hand, grandmother and granddaughter retraced our steps through the garden, the moonlight guiding us back to the heart of the celebration. Each lantern we passed seemed to glow a little brighter, as though it, too, rejoiced in our reconciliation. Inside the pavilion, the string quartet had switched to an upbeat swing number. Couples clapped to the rhythm, and children darted between tables, weaving under chairs and emerging with triumphant shrieks. My daughter raised her glass at me, winking conspiratorially. I returned the gesture, feeling a lightness in my chest I hadn't known since the day began. Eliza led me to the center of the dance floor. For a moment, the music hushed, and all eyes turned toward us. Then the first upbeat notes of Cheek to Cheek filled the air. With a shy smile, Eliza offered her hand. I placed my palm in hers. And we began to sway. The world narrowed to that golden circle of light and sound, her hand warm in mine, her head resting lightly against my shoulder. I closed my eyes, letting the music carry me back through the years, rocking her in my arms. As a baby, holding her hand on her first day of school, cheering her on at every milestone. Here we were again, dancing beneath the stars. As we moved, Eliza whispered, "Thank you for being here. For everything." I kissed her temple. "Always, my love. Always." And in that moment, beneath a canopy of lanterns and long after the name tag had been forgotten, I understood, the truest celebration is found not in grand gestures or lavish displays, but in the quiet honesty of hearts laid bare, mother to daughter, grandmother to granddaughter, and the unspoken promise that family endures, beyond all labels and expectations. When the last strains of A Cheek to Cheek faded into applause, I found myself laughing freely, an unburdened, heartfelt laugh that felt foreign and yet beautifully familiar. I let Eliza slip from my grasp and wandered through the pavilion, taking in the scene with renewed eyes. The long trestle tables were strewn with rose petals, lanterns and candles flickered in crystal holders, and the guests' faces glowed with warmth and delight. Everywhere I looked, people were talking, dancing, savoring the evening as if it were a fine wine. Slowly, appreciatively, fully I slipped behind a cluster of ferns to a small terrace overlooking the lake, where gentle waves lapped against a stone balustrade. The moon had climbed higher, turning the water into liquid silver. In the distance, fireworks burst in brilliant cascades of ruby and indigo, their reflections splintering across the surface like living jewels. Children pressed their noses against the railing, squealing in delight. Their parents stood behind them, arms wrapped around each other. It was a moment of pure, unadorned wonder, one that no amount of planning or spending could ever replicate. My daughter appeared at my side, holding 2 cups of steaming spiced cider. She handed me one, her smile secretive. "They're passing these around now, your idea, remember? Autumn spices for summer nights." I laughed. I almost forgot. The warmth of the cider seeped into my palms, radiating through my chest. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the fireworks bloom overhead. Then, above the final burst of color, a hush fell over the guests. From somewhere off to the side, Thomas emerged, carrying a slender wooden box bound with an ivory ribbon. He caught my eye and beckoned me over. Curiosity piqued, I followed him through the crowd, feeling like a child on Christmas morning. Eliza stood beside him, her eyes bright in the lantern glow. She held a small bouquet of the lake's white lilies, petite blossoms I had always associated with tranquility and new beginnings. She smiled at me with that same radiant joy I had seen in her as a toddler discovering her first flower. "Grandma," she said, voice full of emotion, "we have one more thing for you." Thomas knelt on one knee, an echo of their earlier vows, and extended the box. My fingers trembled as I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside lay a locket of the finest gold, its surface engraved with delicate vines and 2 entwined initials, D and E. With gentle care, I lifted the pendant and opened it. There, pressed beneath a tiny pane of crystal, was a photograph from 10 years ago, Eliza at age 7, grinning up at me as we sat on the same garden bench where we had our earlier conversation that night. Tears pooled in my eyes. "Oh, my dears," Eliza knelt beside Thomas and took my hand. "I wanted you to have something you could carry with you always," she said. "Not a reminder of what you purchased, but of what you've given me, your love, your guidance. Your time." I pressed the locket to my heart, feeling its cool weight against my skin. The clamor of the reception fell away. I was back in that ivy-clad alcove, back on the cobblestones under the jasmine trellis, in that moment of shared confession. "This is the most precious gift I have ever received," I whispered. Thomas rose and offered his arm. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Beechwood?" I laughed through my tears and accepted. He led me to the center of the pavilion. A gentle ballad began, one I didn't recognize, but its melody felt as timeless as the bond between grandmother and granddaughter. We danced slowly, surrounded by the soft glow of candles and the muted twinkle of fairy lights. As we moved, I thought of every Sunday afternoon spent teaching Eliza to bake scones, of the time she scraped her knee and I bandaged it while singing her lullabies, of every proud moment when she took her first steps, her first words, her first day of school. Each memory shimmered like a gem, each one a testament to a love that had always been unconditional and immeasurable. When the song ended, Thomas bowed with a flourish, and a ripple of applause followed. I curtsied in return, laughing as though no one had called me the old lady who's paying for everything all afternoon. In that instant, I realized that the story of this day would not be told in dollars and cents, nor would it be defined by a poorly phrased name tag. Instead, it would live in moments like these: the quiet catch of breath at a fireworks display, the ache of joy at an unexpected gift, the comfort of a dance in a loved one's arms. Later, as the final guests drifted away and the pavilion lights dimmed, I stood by the lakeshore once more. The water was calm now, mirroring the stars overhead. Eliza slipped beside me, her arm hooked through mine. We stood in silence, sharing the stillness. "Thank you, Grandma," she said softly. "For everything." I leaned down and kissed her temple. "Thank you," I replied. "For everything." The tears that came then were not of embarrassment or unease, but of pure contentment. Because in the end, the real gift of the day was not a grand gesture or a costly affair, it was the knowledge that love, simple and steadfast, would always be enough. And as I looked at my granddaughter, now a wife, with a life of her own unfolding before her, I felt richer than any name tag could ever proclaim.